I'm Jim Czek.
I'm Renee Merrifield.
And we're here with Beyond the Ballot. Lots to talk about as usual. But the big question now, are the Liberals and the BC NDP self-sabotaging our economy? It just seems like we just keep shooting ourselves in the foot, the hip, wherever we can find a place to shoot. Every time we seem close to a deal, we just seem to want to implode on ourselves.
Yeah, and I mean, that's been really interesting. I know that you and Ian on the morning show have definitely covered off a lot of that. But even Doug Ford and the drama between Doug Ford and Carney has been very interesting. Carney throwing Doug under the bus, Doug returning to, retaliating by saying, well, no, he actually approved the ad. So, we looked like we were really close, but it does seem like from the comments of the ambassador that there were a lot of shenanigans going on beforehand. I saw someone on social media posting, I'd love to know what deals we're actually saying no to, as well as the ones that we would say yes to. So I think that we're definitely shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to the negotiations with the U.S. That is definitely hurting us economically. The retaliatory tariffs and additional 10% that Trump slapped on is not, who knows when that will come true. And, there's the whole taco, Trump always chickens out, which is, what the economists are saying right now. So who knows if he'll actually go through with it. But it doesn't matter, because the reality is that it's already had the effect that is desired, which is to throw our economy into chaos. Business uncertainty is at an unprecedented peak. We have numbers that have never been seen before, including in inside of COVID. So we definitely do not have business certainty. Business investment has plummeted, and we have economies that are barely barely hobbling forward and showing decline in the last 2 quarters. Bank of Canada is going to lower interest rates, but I don't know if it actually matters, because until people have confidence in their economy moving forward and their jobs of tomorrow, I don't see things changing.
Our currency is basically our stock. That's the stock ticker of Canada. And I'm going to show you these. And this is Canada's stock compared to some of the other currencies in the world, obviously the USD there. And it's trending lower on all, on most of the currencies. And that's not a healthy looking chart. And most commodities are priced in US dollars. So that means bad news for the consumer, because when you're buying your cherries, grapes, anything, gas, everything is priced in USD. And if the Canadian dollar, that's a sick looking chart. All of them, they look sick. And go ahead.
It's bad news for inflation. Everything costs more.
Yeah, and then that is when Mark Carney's the Bank of Canada governor, and right now there may be some room for the Bank of Canada to lower rates a little bit, because I think the Fed in the U.S. is going to lower rates, but again, one way to move the currency up is you actually have to raise rates, right? But it's
and it does look like they're going to lower the interest rate. Bank of Canada is largely speculated. Doug Porter was out on that this morning, basically saying that it looks like the Bank of Canada was going to have to lower rates.
Yeah, because our real estate market not doing well either, and that's where the majority of Canadian wealth is in real estate. So they need to do something to fix the real estate market, especially in some of the centers like Vancouver and Toronto. Not doing that well. And a lot of those COVID mortgages are starting to come due. This is a piece from Money Talks, and this really talks about the last decade here where we seem to have policies that are self-sabotaging our economy here. Let's listen into what he has to say.
When you think about per capita, think about standard of living of yourself or the average individual in Canada. It used to be equal with the United States. Today, after the last 10 years, Canada's per capita GDP is between 28th and 33rd in the world, from 3rd in the world. And the amount of money that we make vis-a-vis an American is just $56,000 in US dollars versus $89,000 for the average person in the US as a whole. If you look at Ontario, which is one of Canada's richest province, it is a GDP equal to the poorest state now in the United States, which is Mississippi. But a starker contrast, and this one sort of hit home in looking at this a few months ago. British Columbia's per capita GDP is just $56,000. Just cross the border into Washington State, and the per capita GDP there is double that of BC at $108,000. Yet, if you can believe it, and this is the kicker, the top marginal personal income tax rate in Washington State is just 37%. And in BC, it's 53%. So we make half as much money as they do, and we're taxed 30% more.
How do we compete? I asked Brenda Bailey, the finance minister here in BC, and she was adamant that BC is competitive, that it has some of the lower rates. And I'm just like, I don't know what she's looking at.
Yeah, she's probably looking at the lowest of the low income tax brackets, but that doesn't really matter. That's not what's driving the economy forward. It's, can you attract the creative capital? Can you attract the workforce that you need to increase your productivity rates? The big criticism is that many businesses actually don't invest in modernization or modifications or innovation. Instead, they just employ low income wage earners. Well, that basically goes against what Brenda Bailey would be saying, and really what we need to do is get far more competitive. We know we're not competitive. That's why we're buying ferries from China.
It's really tough to take. And then no deal. This is the other thing. I think there was an economist we played earlier this morning talking about tariffs has actually worked in the U.S. They've onshored lots of manufacturing back to the U.S. and it hasn't really stoked their inflation. I mean, they have something that Canada doesn't have, and that's the U.S. dollar, the reserve currency of the world, and they also have that military might and people lining up to want to be protected under that umbrella with that, the Russian-Ukraine war. So, I mean, they have some advantages Canada just does not have, right? But Brookfield, I inked a deal. Look at this. This is the Trump administration announced a partnership with Brookfield, formerly headed by Mark Carney, to build a series of nuclear reactors. Totally, there's Brookfield doing business in the U.S., making money, a Canadian company making money, and the chemicals involved in this deal too. But why can't we get a deal if Brookfield can get a deal?
Yeah, the two trips that were taken, Trump's trip to Asia and Carney's trip to Asia, were so different. Everywhere that Trump went, he was announcing some form of deal, and Carney couldn't even get an audience in some of the countries he was planning to go to. So let's take Japan, for instance. Trump announces this massive deal on critical minerals, and at the same time, Carney can't even get an audience because the government has changed in a way that is not favorable to the Carney administration. So, Carney's basically going around talking about green tech and green energy, with absolutely no deals coming from any of the countries he's visiting. And on the other hand, Trump's announcing deals left, right, and center, and also doing deals with Carney's company, which just irks me to no end. I get very annoyed whenever I see Brookfield, because it just seems so disingenuous that leader is the leader of our country right now, as our country is imploding economically.
Whenever somebody gives me grief about this Team Canada thing, I say, Melanie Joly, he sits right next to you. Ask him why Brookfield left. Ask him why his investments are in the United States. There's your answer. That's why capital flees Canada. He knows the answer. He did it. He has the answer. He has the answer. Just ask him. They speak about Team Canada, yet the team leader, not so much. And you're right. In Japan, they tried to get it. They tried to even visit Japan, and they said they don't have time right now because they don't have time to take another visitor. Imagine that, eh? And then.
But the politicos all knew that it was basically because, they've had a change in government. The government in Japan has gone far right. They're about to expel all of the immigrants that are there. Obviously she's been very, very strong about the trade alliances that she wants to create. And I think she saw nothing that she really needed in Carney and a lot of what she wanted in Trump. So, basically had a kumbaya moment with Trump and told Carney not to come.
Yeah, I watched their meeting there and they were making deal after deal. I think about $518 billion of commitments just going around the table. Have you put any in yet? And then I'll put 20 billion. And then they went on the U.S. George Washington, the aircraft carrier that sits there in Japan, and rousing reception there by the troops and for both Trump and the first female prime minister of Japan. Two big feat there for sure.
Yeah, you're a little bit warbled, Jim, just on your
Hi.
mic, FYI. Yeah, and what I would say about that is that the troops are rallying. I mean, they finally have a champion in Trump, and he's putting a lot of money into their armed forces, and I think it's a great show of what supported workers look like. And I don't want to diminish their service because they are literally putting their lives on line. But when people are supported by their leader, it's just amazing what great things can happen. I don't think that Carney would have that same reception, not by our military and certainly not by our industries right now, who are feeling absolutely decimated by his policies and by the things that he's choosing to do. It does not bode well anytime soon for where we're going. And I'm very disappointed in his promises and in what he's been able to accomplish in this last 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched him on a couple of aircraft carriers in the last little while, and the reception on those aircraft carriers has been nothing short of stupendous. And they are getting the recruitment numbers, where we're still not getting those in Canada. But they spend a lot on their military, and that's what gives them that might all around the world, right? That's why, Japan rolls out the red carpet. I mean, they're protected by the United States of America. We're protected by the United States of America, make no mistake. We rest comfortably every night underneath the umbrella of the United States of America.
Yeah, we indeed are. We indeed are. And Trump's made it clear he's not really interested in resuming talks. So Carney can say whatever he wants to. If Carney goes ahead and negotiates with China, again, it's another nail in our coffin. There was a really interesting article this weekend. I think it was in the Globe and Mail, just about the blunders that Carney is making. And it was actually written by the former ambassador, I believe, to the Middle East by Canada. And basically, she details first name was Vivian, I believe, but she details just all the blunders and what Carney is doing to the relationship between Trump and Carney and the U.S. and Canada. And it was really quite telling and really quite damning just from that perspective. So I think, the commercial might have been a lightning rod, but I really don't think it was what was leading to this place. I think it was probably, the negotiations were already sour, and this just gives Trump a really easy out. EB jumping, doubling down on that is the most ridiculous and ludicrous thing I could ever think of doing, especially when you have an economy on its knees and your deficit is only growing. I mean, talk about the BCGEU new deal. I mean, honestly, that is going to cripple us as a province with over $1.5 billion a year that's going to be added to our balance sheet of deficit, and with no real end in sight.
And this thing, there's a lot of chatter out there about Carney possibly inking his first deal, really, and that's with China. So, and it sounds like maybe the EV deal is they're going to drop the EV tariffs so they can get the canola going again. That would basically signal the end of the auto manufacturing here in Canada as well, which may be gone anyway. So maybe that is the deal. But Mark Carney said in his leadership race there that China was the most significant threat to Canada. So he seems to, yeah.
Yeah, he did say that. Brookfield also has a multi-billion-dollar deal with China. So we can't forget that. So as much of a threat, Carney is also very conflicted in terms of his negotiations with China. Also, we have to remember Sam Cooper is all over this, and in all over, just what China is doing to get either politicians elected and who's in whose back pocket. Sam's done an amazing job of expose on Brookfield and the alliance of Brookfield with China. Please look at his information. He is not a conspiracy theorist. He is certainly someone who has done a lot of work and a lot of due diligence. But he's sounding the alarm bell again with a prime minister that is incredibly conflicted in his interests and really should be taken, to heart. I'm very happy happy if we get a deal for the province or for the prairies. They are just taking it on the chin, left, right, and center right now. So that would be amazing. I welcome the EVs from China, and yes, would it signal a change in our auto industry? It would. The change is already there. We are already seeing all of these manufacturers going south. We have to play a little bit of defense here. I am also very concerned, and no offense to the Tesla drivers, Jim, wink, wink. Tesla is the big winner in our EV mandates because we've got all these car companies paying Tesla massive amounts of levies. This would be a great equalizer and would certainly signal some better pricing for the Canadian public. So I'm all for it, and let the market dictate where it's going to go.
It would also relax in the EV mandates. The EV tariffs on Chinese automobiles would bring more Teslas to Canada because right now the only ones really selling is the Y, which is coming out of Giga Berlin. So because they used to bring them all out of Shanghai, and the 3 and the Y would come out of Shanghai, and they haven't been coming because of the tariffs.
Very true. Very true. It's a great point. Now, don't get me wrong. If Carney, and it looks like a when, not if, but if Carney does a deal with China, it will be a further nail in our coffin with the U.S.
Yeah, and then it'll be interesting to see because Trump meets with President Xi as well on Thursday, so it'll be interesting to see who gets a deal. The Americans are talking that they have a deal as well, at least a framework for a deal. So we'll see what's what. The markets are up on those notices. But the one that's puzzling me a lot is, Tim Hodgson. I thought he was a serious guy, but he seems to have couched a lot of his remarks. He won't say the word oil. He calls it hypothetical. But now here's this thing from CTV Canada to work with G7 partners to secure critical mineral supply deals. And this one, we watched the Australians ink a deal. They were in the White House. Albanese there, getting a critical minerals deal with Trump. And you think, we just have to drive a truck across the border here, and they got to sail it across an ocean, and yet they get a critical minerals deal. I know the Aussies have been eating our lunch and mining forever, buying our mining companies as well. I mean, they've been going all in on mining, and we've been dragging our feet 20 years to get a mine permitted here in Canada, and the Aussies are fast-tracking their stuff, so...
Yeah, it doesn't matter, Australians, Japanese, or Ukrainians. The U.S. is dominating right now in their deals with critical mineral deals. So this is so Johnny come lately to the supply chain. And I really think that we'd have to get far more serious about permitting and, before this is even going to have any substance to it.
And then the other part of that Aussie meeting, which I shake my head and I just wonder, our military, I've talked about this many times, underfunded, under-equipped, undermanned, underpaid. I mean, who can argue with that? And I've asked Stephen Fear for an interview. And we just did the story on it. A lot of their accommodation, their housing is uninhabitable. Unsafe drinking water, toilets that don't flush, deteriorating walls. And that was, and the auditor went there and looked, and it was like 7 of 14 buildings that were inspected, failed. How do we treat our military that bad? And then here's the rub. The Aussies are there, and they're going to get out of this AUKUS deal, Australia, the UK, and the US, a nuclear sub. Canada's still hand-wringing. We've got 4 old diesel subs that we bought in a UK garage sale, I think it was in 1998 or something. And then they were used at the time. We're going to buy more diesel subs. They don't compete with a nuclear sub. They don't even come close. And you can go run it, you can go take it on ChatGPT, and you can go ask the difference between a nuclear sub and a diesel sub. And basically, the only plus for the diesel sub is, well, you can buy more of them because they're cheaper. Okay.
Yeah, we are so far behind in our supply, and so far behind in the capital expenditures, and so far behind in operating expenditures. This is like a case of, like a country with all of our castles that are in disrepair, and we could even find someone to fix it, but literally you have to have enough money to fix it, and you have to have enough money to maintain them. I saw another article that was in in the news this last week that said Canada, it doesn't even supply enough operating expenses to repair and maintain our the F-35s that we've got on order. We need to get serious about this. We need a complete revamp of our priorities federally and how we're spending money. We need to get out of the way of the provinces. We need to get out of the way of business. We need to absolutely hypercharge our economic forces and our resource sector and absolutely build some prosperity, because we don't have enough money for what everything is costing us right now. And without it, we are going to become prey to someone else in terms of a takeover. I hate to say it, but the 51st state looks more and more likely unless we can get on our feet. And it doesn't seem like Carney is taking that very seriously right now.
Yeah, to all the sanctimonious liberals that think that we're crazy here, we have the largest coastline, because we have the Pacific, Atlantic, and the Arctic coastline, and we have 4 antiquated diesel subs. Two of them we got in a UK garage sale that were lit on fire as we were driving them back. This is way back in the late 90s. And now we're hand-wringing over who's going to build our diesel subs. We can't even build our own diesel subs. And then Australia is getting, how do we not, I know the Americans are looking after our coastline for us, but if we keep sticking sticks in their eyes, maybe they say, you know what, look after yourself. The last 2 incursions into our airspace where they had to scramble jets because they were unidentified, they weren't Canadian jets that scrambled. You can call them NORAD, but they were F-35s that were scrambled, American F-35s.
Yeah. And I mean, this is case in point. This is why we have so little negotiating power with the states, is that they control so much of our security, so much of our economy, so much, they don't need us. The one thing that you didn't mention actually with the tariffs, the other reason that the tariffs are working, I mean, we've talked about the chaos, we've talked about, getting jobs and manufacturing back to the US, but the other reason that they're working is they are sitting on a ton of cash. And those counter tariffs that Carney talked about that he never actually enacted appropriately, and then pulled before the election, but forgot to tell anyone about it. That was, going to put $20 billion into our coffers, and now it's putting nothing into the coffers. Now, that's taxpayer dollars. But even when in talking with the economists, what they're saying is that the American public hasn't actually been paying for those tariffs in full. It's the companies that are taking it on the chin. So in large part, where it's coming from is, the countries of origin rather than the American people, which I am shocked about. And eventually it will probably trickle down, and most economists agree that it will. But for right now, they're getting off not entirely scot-free, but pretty scot-free. And they are getting money. And that's what Trump needed. And you and I talked about this right at the beginning. It was like, that's craziness. Tariffs result in a lowering of economy and oftentimes depression or recession, and, if nothing else. But the big but is he had an economy, or he had a deficit that was sliding and in free fall, and when he took over, and this was the fastest way that he could get money into the coffers.
Almost $800 billion, according to some of the stats that are out there. Almost $1 trillion already collected. And the biggest thing out of all of that, Ian and I talked about this morning, is the amount of onshoring of jobs. And Apple, which hasn't built a factory in the U.S. for a long, long time, $500 million. And this is on and on and on, like all these things at $500 billion. Like the amount of commitment, just around the table yesterday in Japan, Toyota committing to build plants. Like everybody's committing to spend money in the U.S. And we see the charts, we've shown you the charts here of capital fleeing Canada because of the lack of certainty. And that's the difference, right? We need to find certainty. We need to say the words oil pipeline. We need to say the words oil pipeline. Like, not hypothetical. If there was a deal, there's, you know what I mean? Like, we just hand wring. Like, you talk about the F-35s. We still are, have we actually committed to them? Like, I mean, we commit, then we uncommit, we commit, we uncommit. I haven't seen one.
No, I haven't either. And yeah, the hand wringing has to stop, and we actually have to start building an economy. Energy is everything. Cheap energy is prosperity.
Trump said today, or it was yesterday, that they're going to get gasoline down to $2 a gallon. You know what that is in Canada? That would be probably like 40 cents a liter. Imagine
a
what
little
that
bit
would,
more than 40 cents a liter. It'd be about 60 cents a liter, but that's okay.
Imagine what that would mean to people, right? Because that is even better than any tax cut you can do, because that is immediate in the pocket money for people, right? Because that's your heating bills at home, that's your gasoline bills, that's everything. That's immediate return to the taxpayer, right? Like, because that's less taxation, less costs, right? And
Yeah,
that's good for companies too.
And the scary part is that these investments and these are dollars that are fleeing from other countries. $134 billion has gone from Canada to the U.S. and that's as of July from this year. But then there's also the jobs, and if you look at all the jobs announcements that have gone on in Canada, it's like this is closing, this is shutting down, this is cutting staff. Well, those same announcements are being, duplicated, or the mirror image of those announcements are going out in the U.S., where it's like, such and such plant adding jobs, such and such plant adding jobs. This company investing $4 billion, $2 billion, $1 billion. So it is having an affect, and as much as I hate to say it, his prediction was accurate. They see him as a threat, and companies are responding. But the companies have also been given advantageous tax treatment. So while they have, they're creating these jobs for the economy, they're also, being advantaged on a global scale to do so. So, whether it's 30, I loved that Bloomberg, that last sentence was so important. We make, half as much, and we're taxed,
30% more. 30% more. Yeah. And here's David Eby's now said he's going to run ads too after Doug Ford's ad fiasco. Doug Ford is kind of like a mini dime store version of Donald Trump, I guess you could say too, because he's the biggest ad ever, the most views, the most everything. But here's Eby going hard at it too. I wonder what they would do if all of a sudden the Americans started running ads here in Canada. How they would just get all kind of like virtue signaling, but how dare they? How dare they run ads here? Like, I don't know, and I think that might happen if they don't just like pull back and just start saying, we need a deal. Canada needs a deal in the worst way.
We saw huge political interference when Trump started commenting on our federal election. It was, political interference is not taken lightly, and it shouldn't be. We did, because it favored, the political party that the media favored. But that is why there's such a backlash. And, for Doug Ford to say, well, it works because it saw this many views, I can guarantee you that the American public are not swayed by that right now. No. They're swayed by, do I have a job? Yep, because they have 4.4% unemployment rate. Am I making more money than my counterparts? Yep, they are. Just proven, Ontario, the richest, province in Canada, is, makes less money than does the poorest state. So we are worse off. So that is like, why would they take any advice from us? And for Eby to run these ads, I think this is nothing more than performative politics. He is trying to trump up a force and an adversary in Trump that then he can say, look, it's all Trump's fault, rather than looking in the mirror and actually taking responsibility for where we're at economically and where we are at on our budget.
I guess you could say for Eby and Carney and Ford, it's worked. They've strawmanned Trump a lot without actually having to do the hard work. And, and it's not good for the voter. That's record food bank lineups, and that's what's happening. That's who's paying the price, right? It's Canadians that are paying the price.
It's Canadians paying the price. Absolutely. Absolutely. And at some point, people have to wake up and say, this is not a government that is for us. I think the Cowichan case and both the BC and the federal government choosing not to make arguments, for extinguishment, I think is one of the biggest blunders, and probably will go down in history as such a game changer, and not standing up for the general public. It's going to be really interesting to watch tonight. There's that information session being held in Richmond. And I can tell you, last week I was in Vancouver for almost the entire week, and that is all that anyone is talking about. So, in some ways it was a gift that it's not just the Haida, which is like a far away off land, an island that nobody really understands and that nobody really has a lot of ties to. It's in some ways a really big gift that it's the Lower Mainland, and it's threatening our economic centers. You've got Montrose Properties that, holds Wayfair, Amazon, and Coca-Cola, warehouses. We're talking, these are big entities that are threatened right now with this latest legislative decision.
And this is where this self-harm comes in as well. And this EV mandate, Melanie Joly and Champagne and Freeland and Carney say, we will fight for the automobile sector. At the same time, we've said it many times too, is, the the CEOs of these auto manufacturers here in Canada have said it, get rid of the EV mandate. And they're saying it again, repeal the electric vehicle mandate. And that's from Brian Kingston, the CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. And he said it could be done today. It would have the immediate benefit of the automobile industry. Why isn't it done? In one breath, we're going to save the jobs, but on the other side, they're killing the jobs with an EV mandate. It's just, it's so, like, it's bizarre.
It's bizarre, but it's not. You and I have said this many times, don't watch what a politician says, watch what they do. In looking at the bail reform bill that the feds put out, it's absolutely a nothing sandwich. They don't really care. They're not changing anything, and it's not going to have any effect on our lives. They are not getting tough on crime, and they don't care about the car industry. If they did, they would repeal the EV mandates. They are not doing that, and in not doing that, it doesn't matter what they say. It's not going to have an effect. And the car industry is telling us what would have an effect, and they're choosing not to do it, which actually is true to their mandate and to where they want to be right now.
When they're sitting in boardrooms making capital decisions, there's one country that has an EV mandate and one that doesn't. And Ford makes its decisions, GM makes its decisions on certainty, and that's it. And I mean, that's the thing, though. The part that's puzzling, we're here to help the automobile industry, but this is crushing the automobile industry. So it doesn't make sense.
And it doesn't matter how much money they throw at it. I mean, look at the billions and billions of dollars that we as a country and that we as a province have thrown at these battery companies and these, EV, green companies. And it is literally being thrown away. And those are taxpayer dollars. I don't understand why the taxpayers aren't more irate about this, with running, massive deficits and then trying to say like it's because we're going to be green. And then the jobs are gone. They're not even materializing into anything substantial.
And I won't go on to this one, but it's because we talked about it too much. It's the same as Bill C-18. Bill C-18 is put into place to help media. It's actually crushed media, and it's the same thing. They won't repeal it. It's the same lunacy. It's just absolutely crazy. But when we go back to the green stuff, one of the leaders in this, like the world is imploding with climate grift and that is Bill Gates. He's now saying that it's not going to end humanity as we know it, and it won't lead to the humanity's demise, that we need to start taking more of a practical look at it. Likely because Microsoft's sitting at the table with Donald Trump a lot now too, isn't he? You know what I mean? They're talking about building. Microsoft is actually firing up 3 Mile Island, the old nuclear plant there, because they need the energy. Everybody in the AI race. So Bill Gates is pulling back from his, existential threat thing that he always talked about. So, Mark Carney, I think the thing that we're going to start to see, and we're going to hear more and more about it, the latest climate grift is going to be carbon capture. If they pull off the emissions cap, they're probably going to say it has to be replaced with carbon capture, which will basically give private companies the ability to tax our energy. Isn't that just a beautiful thing?
No, it's a ridiculous thing, and it needs to stop, and it needs to end. And we need some sobriety in this world of madness, and we need to get government out of the way instead of being in the way of our economic success.
We're going to shift our focus a little bit to British Columbia here. We've got about 10 minutes left here because we do have the city manager here from Kelowna at 1 o'clock. We saw, you highlighted this story first, the pediatricians here in Kelowna when they left KGH. And then the OBGYNs in Kamloops, they mass quit. And then just the other day, it was a couple of days ago, psychiatrists in Vernon. And now, 128 BC doctors condemned the province, IH, over failing maternity care, and that's over 100 OBGYNs from across BC have signed this letter, and it is just crazy. 128 signatures on this letter, and it comes after almost 2 weeks after the entire 7 OBGYNs quit or resigned at the Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops. We've asked for an interview from the new CEO. The other one left after all the goings on with the pediatrics. And a lot of that was to do with lack of communication, and we just keep getting letters back. We're looking into it. They need accountability. They need to start answering questions because they just don't seem to get it.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw that this morning, Josie Osborne said, we have nothing but confidence in Interior Health's leadership. I think that was maybe a mistake. I don't know if she felt like she had to put something out there. But I also want to say, like, these are issues at the top. This is when you have this many doctors that are coming out against you, there's something terribly, terribly wrong. And, what I'm hearing from the doctors is that there is a moral distress with how they are being asked to give care. And what that means in just practical, pragmatic terms is that the doctors do not feel like they can do the job that they need to do to save lives. So that means that when a doctor is faced with an untenable situation, like basically you have to save one or the other because you only have so many resources or you only have so much time, that they literally feel, because they take on and go into these professions because they want to help people. So they like literally are making decisions of life and death on an ongoing basis and playing God. And it is untenable. When an obstetrician is saying no more, think about what an obstetrician does. They are called in at the last minute when something is going wrong with the birth of a baby. You do not want your obstetrician in moral distress choosing between your baby and the baby in the next room as to which one will live and which one will die, because there's only one of them that can get to one of those patients. That is what is being required of these doctors. Thank God they are coming forward and actually sounding the alarm bell. And please, pay attention, public. When your psychiatrists in a hospital, when your ob-gyns in a hospital, when your pediatricians in a hospital are saying, we cannot perform our duty of care in the way that we are supposed to under the current conditions, things must change. And what we're being told is that IH is filling these positions with locums. You are not going to get the same standard of care from a locum as one that lives, breathes, eats, sleeps, and dreams and dies in your community. So this is a horrific mismanagement, and I think we need systemic change, and I think that we need change from the top, which is not actually Sylvia Weir, who is the CEO. I think we need systemic change, which is actually farther at the top, and that is Josie Osborne. Adrienne Dix tried and failed Josie Osborne, and I think it's because their ideology is trumping great outcomes-based care for patients.
You and I talked about this a long time ago when they offered up the former CEO at Interior Health. How deep does the rot go, up and down? And because they offered somebody up as the sacrificial lamb, but did they fix anything? And obviously the answer to that is no. And,
no, in political terms, they were trying to take out the trash with Susan Brown. I think it was, was she perfect? No, definitely not. But we needed change. Them taking someone from the inside, especially someone in finance, I think that
is second in command, really, right? She was there for the whole thing.
The entire thing, basically driving the care that we have today. So, as a board, what you would do is you would hire someone from the outside if you were trying to signal that there was going to be change. You hire someone from the inside if you think everything's going great and you want a stabilized, transition. This is a huge, I think, blunder on behalf of the board, but I think also it's approved by Josie Osborne. You cannot have a CEO without having her stamp of approval. So on this one, I think that this goes all the way to the top. Josie has an issue, and if she doesn't change things, there's going to be people that will literally pay with their lives.
We're going to just do one last story here. We're going to go right to the First Nations, and this is EB being accused of stirring up unnecessary fears over the Aboriginal title case. I've talked about this quite a bit. I've also interviewed Jeff Moyse, Aboriginal lawyer, and this is serious, and it's part of the certainty. I've actually asked Brenda Bailey about it too, and she recognized that it's serious because it takes away certainty here in British Columbia.
Absolutely. This is a catastrophic decision that is sending ripple waves. We're starting to hear in the development industry about loans being pulled. That is not just for a developer. That will be for independent owners and private fee simple title, because there is no certainty. They cannot get loans. I don't mean to be alarmist. I will be on this particular case. EB is talking again out of both sides of his mouth. His ideology lines up completely with what this decision agreed with, which is why he told his attorney general and why he, as the attorney general, did not argue extinguishment on fee simple title. He could have easily done that. He did not. This is his choice. And when you look and read the decision, there are three things that were noted. One was the Haida decision, the Haida law that was put in place by Eby himself. So this is an Eby decision and an Eby wearing. He then went and got it ratified through consent order with the Supreme Court. Eby did that. Nobody else did that. Eby did that. Eby supported that. This rides with Eby. And the third aspect is that they supported DRIPA. And, BC is the only province that has actually embedded the UNDRIP, the UNDRIP treaty inside of our own legislative rules. This is horrific. And this is the Eby government's plan. So I've watched a lot of the First Nations trying to say, hey, it's not going to be that bad. Let's just all ignore this. Thank goodness that we had Malcolm Brody send out a letter to the affected landowners saying your land title is actually under review and is no longer yours. There's 18 months for the government to negotiate this. That is it. That is all. And then the law will stand. So I am very concerned about what this means for further investment dollars and very concerned about what it means for the future of fee simple in BC.
We had Jonathan Kay, and a national journalist in here, very well known, and he said, as bad as Canada is, he said they look over at BC and they say, "What are you guys doing over there?" He said, "This title thing, your politics. You got a dysfunctional Conservative Party. Rustad hasn't resigned yet, and then you have." The BC NDP that's living in La La Land. And you can watch the clips. I mean, he laid it out perfectly, and he said that even the Liberal government looks at BC and says, "What is going on over there?" And that's not good. If Canada is kind of being laughed at for some of the decisions we make, and then BC is the laughing stock of Canada.
Totally. And, the Liberal government also did not argue extinguishment. So this is also them. They also supported the Haida Supreme Court consent and were in favor of that. So, I mean, this also runs with Carney, who is part of two of those decisions. But I would agree with Jonathan Kay. We are in La La Land, and we are seeing investment dollars flee our province. And I would love to see a province by province, investment, because I think that BC is going to be far behind the rest of the provinces of Canada.
Yeah, it's actually really puzzling to see how they could make such decisions. And Jeff Moy said this could take 5 to 7 years just to go through the BC appeals court, and they won't hear it at the Canadian Supreme Court until it's finished, exhausted at the BC level. So the cloud that hangs over these properties right now is 5 to 7 years, 10 years, and then there's other cases in the system right now. He doesn't know how many, but like some people, I think you've said that there's over 100% of the lands, because there's overlapping claims in British Columbia. And Jonathan Kay, and you said yourself, BC is one of the provinces that has this problem really bad, and so does Nova Scotia, but Alberta and a lot of the other provinces have treaties in place. So, BC definitely looking very uncertain, and that certainly goes for developers like yourself. It also goes for mining companies. It goes for when land's in question, how do you make a deal with anybody?
It goes for someone who's moving into BC for a job. It's not, it's anyone. When you do not have certainty on your title, you're not going to buy it. But also for renters, for, large institutional, landlords, there's not going to be as much investment in BC, not with this uncertainty that lingers and is hanging over our heads.
Again, great show. I do have Doug Gilchrist, the city manager. We're going to talk about a few things here. We're going to talk about that investment downtown, the West Corp thing, and then we're going to talk about the other capital works plan they just put out. And we'll talk a little bit about the Airbnb thing, see what's going on with that as well.
Sounds like an amazing show. Thanks, Jim.
All right, thank you, and we'll see you next week, and thank you for watching Now Media.